Thank you very much. Thank you, Gertrude, for the introduction. And yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this lunch talk and yeah, happy to join from Hamburg. So worldwide, the crisis on climate and food and health is alarming, and it's time to see the interrelation and to connect concerned policies. We see that the climate and health crisis is merging on our plates. So we see nutrition is mainly responsible for climate change and weak health conditions. Since now already 5 years, and even worse with the war in the Ukraine, we see hunger and malnutrition are increasing. More than 811 million people are facing hunger, and there will be more. 2 billion people are lacking essential nutrients and vitamins, affecting their health. And on the other hand, we also have 2 billion people suffering from obesity, increasing the risk for chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease or diabetes type 2. And with looking then on the climate, we see more than 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions are resulting from our food system, from our industrialized food system. So fact is, without changing our agricultural and food system, we won't reach the Paris Agreement to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, nor reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So looking at the planetary boundaries, maybe you are familiar with this concept. We see that already 4 out of 9 boundaries, which are essential for our livelihood, are exceeded. We see it where they pass the inner circle, the yellow and the orange lines. We see it for climate change, and we see it even worse next to climate change for loss of biodiversity. We see it also for land use change and deforestation, with alarming numbers coming from, for example, Brazil on the Amazonas. And we see it also for too high use of phosphor and nitrogen. So we see a transformation of the food system is needed. And maybe you can skip to the next slide and we see it, yes. And we had in 2019 the Eat Lancet report, and they put it like this, that they say food systems have the potential to nurture human health and support environmental sustainability. However, our current agriculture and food production threaten both. So we have to deal with this, and the Eat Lancet Commission, you can go to the next slide, please. The Eat Lancet Commission was bringing together 37 scientists from 16 countries and asking the question, or answering the question, how can we feed a future population a healthy diet within planetary boundaries? And they developed the so-called planetary health diet. And I just put this one picture. It's in German, but you can see it's mainly about increasing our intake of fruits and vegetables, and also plant-based food. And to really reduce our intake of meat and animal products. So with changing our eating habits, we could mainly reduce nutrition-related illness and death. And with this climate-friendly diets, we could also reduce greenhouse gases by 50%. The scientists put this in some more strategies. We have to, or what we need to change, and there are it's to address namely 3 key levers to secure food, to address food insecurity, while also ensuring human health and long-term sustainable development. The one is, I already mentioned, shift to healthier diets with less animal products. The other is to reduce food waste. And the third thing is to change our agricultural system from, coming from or changing from quantity to quality, to have more legume production and nature positive agriculture. And that's it then to provide global food security and with our planet and secure our planet. The next one, please. And so now let's, so there is great potential in transforming the food system. And what challenges are we facing in Germany? So also in Germany, we have climate change. We have last year a severe flooding in Germany with people dying and losing their homes. So, and Germany also has global responsibilities since we are a great emittent of greenhouse gases. And we are mainly responsible also for deforestation, for example, for soy production in Latin America. And big German companies are exporting pesticides around the world. Looking at the eating habits in Germany, we also see a lack of eating fruits or vegetables or food rich in fibers. And we eat far too much meat and animal products. And this also has consequences for the health of the people. So we have big challenges, but maybe you go back because I just didn't mention all the things. Yeah, thank you. So we have big challenges. Maybe we are stepping slowly forward. And yeah, what is happening? We see with the new government in Germany, we have some potential to improve our food system, but what we need is a coherent policy. And we need a food policy we don't have until now. Already in 2020, the Scientific Advisory Board on Agricultural Policy, Food and Consumer Health Protection from the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture made recommendations on sustainable food policies for Germany. They found that too much responsibility lies on the consumer. So what we need are fair and sustainable food environments, for example, looking at the kindergarten or school meals. So there are many points in the political discussion, and we see in the coalition agreement that the government announced a food strategy that should come by 2023. We have, they also say to increase ecological production by 30% and to reduce food waste and to have an animal welfare label. We just had last week, the Ministry for Environment made suggestions to reduce taxes for fruits and vegetables to 0. So there are suggestions, but the big point is to bring it all together. We have challenges in German agriculture. studies show that in order to become climate neutral, Germany needs to reduce the quantity of animals and also our meat consumption by 50%. And to do this transformation with the farmers is a big challenge. And we need a transformation of the common agricultural policy within the EU. To stop the direct payment for just having land and link it to support ecological and fair production or agroecology concepts. We see many stakeholders within the food system. They are already on the way to improve the whole system. And we also have a strong civil society. Now the next picture. We have, for example, since 10 years now, every January in Berlin, a big demonstration, an alliance against industrial agriculture, promoting family farming and sustainable food systems. And we have also new alliances coming from people from healthcare. They also link or the points on health, climate, and food. So the last picture shows also an open letter from people from healthcare addressing the actual food crisis we have. Maybe you take the next picture, then this is the one. And we see now with this actual food crisis, it's even more needed that we keep this way for sustainable food systems and not push aside now all these efforts for protecting the climate. So it's really important to see food first and provide food within the planetary boundaries. And I'm very interested in hearing the discussion and also the other inputs today. So for the moment, thank you very much. And I'm interested on the talk now.
Oh, hi, my name is Pedro Coña Caniullan. So today I like to share my experiences. Also, as we know, Indigenous people have a holistic view of our world, and also we try to, from this point of view, find solutions to the current concerns about nutrition, health, and climate. Well, as we saw here in my slides, we see here the health in the center and many connection with different issues. Culture can see environment, economy, but for us Indigenous people, we see globally the life that is stay in our world, and we can test how the condition of life in our world, ourselves as well, is through the health. Health is the close related to the life. Through this idea, we in our concepts, we share this concern about the health. In the, for instance, we meet with our brothers. The first question is about the health condition. As my language, native language, Mapudungun, we say, Mari Mari Peñi Kom Puche, meaning we say hello to our brother and ask for also the relatives about the health conditions. And Does take us a massive information, because as we see here in the graph, health is connected with everything. And when people from other places come to us in our community, when these people is healthy and the family, we assume as well that the environment and the life that we share is also in the same condition. And when it's happening, something is unhealthy, we also this is very important to help, because the same life that we have in our environment is connected with our life. And I like to
next one, please.
The next slide, please. So here, and also we worked at the moment in projects. We like to put together renewable energy issues, education, and agriculture. And how I'd like to explain about this small projects we is performing in Chile. We incorporate a primary school, because for us is children is future. Children is connected to all people in our communities. Is connected also with sustainability, because when they get this information about the natural resources that they have, the increase add values to the culture, knowledge. The idea is to share this knowledge with other schools here in Germany, and to create a space for just communicate their own knowledge and receive. And this area, this space, we have a good chance the people or children see in better form their culture and valorate the life that the many places the people who say our system of life in some community is not well valorated. But as we see here in the agriculture has developed to some point that now is back to our knowledge, and we need also to validate this is value. This is the way to develop new policies about our important issue like nutrition, and also care about of life in the sense that keep good healthy in all sense, in all dimensions that the health is related. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you again. It's my pleasure really to be part of INFO facilitated discussions. Yes, my presentation is just this 5 slides, very simple and direct to the point, which was also prepared by my colleagues. We are also acting as a coordinating group for our Asia Indigenous Women's Network. So this is one of the presentations that some of my colleagues have presented, and I wanted to share as well with us. So as we all know, I'm focusing on the roles and the knowledge of Indigenous women in relation to food systems, health, nutrition, and linked to climate change. As already mentioned by Pedro, indigenous peoples really have a very holistic perspective or view on our life systems, including the food production and also in responding to health and everything related to life. So just to reiterate that our indigenous women are the main bearers and custodians of traditional knowledge, specific systems, nutrition, health, and culture. And with the current crisis on the pandemic, and as well as on climate change impacts, they are the ones who directly cope up to adapt to this climate change impacts to their production systems, to their nutrition, to their health, as well as affecting also the culture. We have here some of the women and trying to also teach the younger generation on how they will be continuing with these indigenous food systems, health practices, and culture as it links to climate change impacts. Next slide, please. So, yeah, as food producers, women really are mostly concerned on the daily food production, as well as looking at the nutrition and health of their families and communities. So they work by the day, but at the end of the day, they process their foods, they pound the rice, they prepare, they cook, and ensure that the family will eat together at the end of the day. And it's a daily subsistence activity, especially for indigenous communities at the local level. Next. Yeah, along the way, indigenous women have already been participating in some of these capacity building programs, as well as leadership trainings, and are now, most of the leaders are really also being engaged as agents of change, especially with this pandemic and also with the climate change impacts into their lives. So actually this one is a picture of a dialogue with government agencies where it presented their concerns and priorities for the government to help on how they will move forward with their own traditional knowledge systems. Because for now, we always say that there is traditional knowledge, but we are also very open to innovations, appropriate innovations and technologies that will support our food systems and production systems along the way, because we have to really respond and cope up with the climate change impacts. Next. Yeah, so this is my last slide. I think we can now say of the good development on how we empower indigenous women along the line, while they are the ones really doing the daily production for food for the family and communities. At the same time, there is a process of learning among themselves. They adapt to climate change and contribute to whatever engagement, as well as improvement of their food production systems to contribute to poverty alleviation, using their traditional knowledge and practices at the same time with appropriate innovations and technologies that they will determine by themselves. These are offered by the government, but they will say no if it does not contribute to their life systems and to their indigenous perspectives and values. So it's a long process. There are many challenges, but still opening up to more positive changes is also one way of contributing to the solution. Next, please. I will just like to add on that we had been part of facilitating indigenous peoples regional summits on food system. This was done in mid 2021 until December. We had regional summits with indigenous peoples. This is specifically hosted by the UN Food System Fund, and we focused on indigenous food systems, specifically on indigenous peoples, agricultural food systems, both contributing to whatever responses and solutions that we have, especially with the impacts of the climate crisis, ecosystem degradation, and biodiversity loss. So these were done during the COVID-19 pandemic and has further intensified existing difficulties that our communities had been facing. However, along the line, we still need to enhance and develop adaptation and resilience of our communities as we face these multiple crises, and we need as well whatever support that will be provided by all sectors in improving these food systems. As we see, it is very much impacted by the climate change at the same time. So with that, maybe I can end here and we can have more discussions later.
So the photo you see is of pastoralists in northeast eastern Uganda at a watering point, and this is them, of course, watering their animals. Some people would say there are inherently resource conflicts in pastoralist communities, but the examples that I'm about to show you show that actually pastoralists know how to deal with the extremes of climate change and can be able to assure food for their families and communities, and make sure that they lead healthy lives. It's the kind of outcome that would make evolutionary scientists like Hardin turn in their graves. Next. And the practice is called Etamam. Etamam is sending the message. Sending a message or communicating is, I think that is primal to humans. But what is so special in pastoralist communities, because of the extremities of climate change, they have, harnessed and institutionalized the practice of sending messages to communities that might have pastoralist resources. So the message is basically, can we share water, pastures? And so usually that initial sending of the message starts a process of negotiating for these resources through pastoralist institutions, some of which listed here, Ekokwa, Etem, or Akriket. These are parliaments or councils in pastoralist societies. So negotiation ensures conflict-free access to these resources. Usually, the negotiation ends in a positive response, and the real things negotiated are conditions for accessing these resources. Next. And just two of examples. One is a woman I met recently, about 6 months ago, on the Kenyan side, whose name actually reminds everyone, and I inclusive, that she is a migrant. Her name is Awesit Karenga. In our dialect, it means migrating to Karenga, a district maybe 600 kilometers away from Kenya. But, she was born when her parents were migrating. And actually, when I met her just 6 months ago, she was just migrating from maybe a location in Moroto where most of my work focuses. She was migrating to Kenya, where her main home is. But she is a migrant, and as I have said, all of this migration that she has experienced for 70 years is based on a traditional mechanism of negotiation for critical resources. Next. And one of these key resources is based on a location north of Moroto called the Kobebe. It's a land rich in grass and land, grass, water, and used by pastoralists from 3 countries: Kenya, Uganda, and sometimes the Sudan. So, but that's what the primary custodians say of Kobebe. It's land, grass, water, and people. It's the water of peace. And they understand that water knows no status, like that drought knows no status, no tribe, and no ranks. Next. And this quote goes on to say how important this resource is. People of Moroto are primary resource holders, and they do get visitors from Turkana and other communities. This is what Turkana communities had to say, or participants. The simulation we did in 2018 had to say about this resource. The breast of the Turkana is Moroto. When drought hits, the first place we step is Moroto. When if hunger strikes us so hard, it's Moroto from which immediate help comes. And this help, of course, is the food that they take. Next. What are our takeaways? Recognizing these practices means working with pastoralists across borderlands from a position of strength, rather than from a position of weakness. Usually, this is conflict and others. Mobility is a means to access productive resources, ensuring the production of food for household and nutrition. This mobility is secured through intricate negotiation mechanisms, and this, in our case, is at a MAM. So a deeper understanding of the workings of pastoralist institutions is needed for interlocutors to achieve optimum outcomes, usually non-governmental actors, and even the private sector. So thank you so much for listening to me. Looking forward to interactions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice introduction. I would like to see you on the side, but unfortunately that was not possible. Now, maybe it seems to be an interesting discussion. At the beginning, we talked about that the global food chain or the global food system has to change very much. We have seen, I think, from all the presentation, that at least you need some solutions which are quite local in a way and address the topics on the ground. Our project Fortinlea was such one, and I will give our perspective to this project we have done. It's especially about improving the contribution that indigenous vegetable can make to food security for particularly poor households. Kenya has a large biodiversity of plants that are suitable for consumption and also bring many beneficial properties. As an example, I have listed these species here, those species we have selected for our research by a stakeholder group. You can read it on the slide. The topic of indigenous vegetable is not one which is very new, and it's not discovered by us for a long time. It was considered as a poor man's food in many of these countries. In recent years, however, the high health value of indigenous vegetables has been highlighted in campaigns by private and public institutions, and we have seen in Kenya that the demand for those food is increasing quite a lot. Depending on the counties we worked in, I think there are different preferences for those crops. So in any way, I think one has to have a very local look to it. Question is, what are the advantage of these vegetable? On the one hand, these are crops which are addressing very much this problem of so-called hidden hunger, the lack of essential ingredients like vitamins and minerals. Many of these species, not all, have higher content of such ingredients than the so-called exotic vegetables in, for instance, Kenya. Moreover, there is a great variety in Kenya, contributing to variety in diets as well as variety in agricultural production system, which is an advantage. The varieties or the species are well adapted to local conditions, relatively easy to handle and robust to drought and pest, and allow for sustainable production in a way. Due to the high labor intensity, I think it offers a lot of labor intensity, which is combined with production as well with preparation of these products. I think it offers income opportunities for smallholder farmers, and also I think the preservation and processing of those products offers some opportunity for job creation in rural areas. So overall, I think there are a lot of advantage to produce this, and the question arises, why are those products not better used for tackling, for instance, food security in these countries? And that was one of the main questions we looked here. Just very short, I think if you're working on this problem, you have to, maybe one step back, you have to you have to have a type of holistic view to it in order to find the impediments or difficulties on the ground, and therefore we use the value chain for food and nutrition security as a type of conceptual framework in order to do these type of analysis. Next slide. Just to have a very short overview about the different institutions and institutes which were involved from Kenya, Tanzania, Germany in this, and it was a very also communication intensive project we did during that time. The project was supported by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research combined with Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation in Germany. And one of the advantages, I have to say, was that we got some extra money in order to go to Kenya and to prepare these projects and to analyze the problems on the ground before we started to do such research. So the next slide. Now we are coming back to our conceptual framework, which was value chains for food and nutrition security, and maybe some words about these concepts, which I think it's very much helpful in order to discuss those things. On the one hand, it's a little bit different from all the concepts because most of them were very much focused on the production side and how to improve production in order to safeguard supply of vegetables for especially disadvantaged households. I think here it's a little bit different. I think we have to look on the production side, that's for sure, but on the other hand, we are quite sure that it's necessary to look also to the people consuming those vegetables and also the cultural embeddedness of those products. So on the one hand, we have quite a lot of disciplines looking for production issues like breeding and plant health and irrigation and those topics. Then on the other hand, we had very much important issues of meal culture, gender, but also looking to vulnerability of coping and shocks, which is very much important in the moment. If you're looking about the stability of food systems, I think this is a topic we have to have very much in mind. And it's necessary also to include politics, institution, infrastructure, which are important in a way, and we also have to look to the dynamic drivers of change. I think we will talk about urbanization, but also climate change in order to tackle the right things. Maybe one last statement in our project was the issue of capacity building, because it's very much clear these projects are maybe 5 years, and then it is and what was very necessary, and we managed to do it in a quite good way, that most of the PhDs and most of the researchers were from Kenya, and hopefully, I don't know if it worked, they can carry over the experience from the project in their future research. We have to look at the end. I would say we can come to some of these results in the discussion. At the end, I would like to say that if we present such concepts in a way, we have to be aware of some of the limitations. Maybe it would be quite good at the end or during the discussion also to talk about some of the difficulties of such project and limitations which are combined with it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I do not have any slides prepared today, but I'm just going to try to give an overview of the work that we do. And first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone that's been speaking before me, and I feel very honored to be here with you and to feel part of this global movement for food sovereignty, because even though in our daily work sometimes we get lost in small details, it's good to kind of step back and have like this image of so many people doing very important work at different places. So I feel that gives a lot of hope. And I want to start by just kind of outlining what we do on a daily. So we are trying to take problems, food sovereignty, and tackle the question, how can we adjust and transform ways of consumption and ways of production in the global north. So Cologne is a city in Germany, a big urban center where little production takes place, but a lot of consumption. So we have like this kind of classic dilemma of food being transported into the city. And the Food Policy Council, that's where it's kind of a link between civil society and the administration of the city Cologne, because as Ms. Remesch said in the beginning, what we're lacking right now in Germany, I can't speak for other countries right now, is a policy action plan and just general policy at a national level when it comes to food politics and also questions of production. So to break it down, food policy councils try to solve this problem at a communal level, so more geared towards the individual cities. And it's a global phenomenon. This is not something that we invented here. We are very humbled to be in relationship with other food policy councils that come before us and see ourselves in the tradition of what they have been doing, of course, adapting to our local context. What we're doing is it's very action oriented. So we have different steps that we want to realize. One of them is implementing urban agriculture and overcoming the polarity that is very common right now in Germany, where we have the city as the place of consumption, and then we have the periphery where production takes place, and often heavily based on fossil fuels. So we have big tractors, and it's just a very intensified agriculture. While of course we base our knowledge on so much science, and then also of course indigenous knowledge that says small-scale farming can and must actually feed the world in a different way. So we need to move away from these large-scale agriculture models. And yeah, we're trying to do this by saying, okay, well, let's start seeing the city where people live also as a place where we can produce. And we can produce in small scale, but also move away from the very European traditional idea of what agriculture looks like. So that's kind of the overall goal, while also implementing ways of democratizing these policy processes by involving civil society. We had a very big writing process with about 300 citizens, where we asked the question, what would an edible city, what would actual food sovereignty in our city look like? What would it feel like? What would it taste like? What would we see? So to kind of get out of our normal way of thinking and conceiving also a city as it is right now, and moving past that kind of like a utopist way of thinking. And this we engaged with about 300 people in the city of Cologne, and over a process of 2 years developed an action plan, which was then accepted. I'm laughing for it, but it was made into a policy for the city of Cologne. So we, which is a big success for us, because we have something to go towards the city when we see that trees are being taken down. For example, one of the things that we have reached is that the 70% of any tree planted has to be edible and has to be like a regional species for the ecosystem. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to democratize anything concerning food policy. Another thing that's very important to us is like an intersectional perspective. So we are trying to cross over any topics related to racism or gender in our work. So to very much focus the question of nutrition and the question also of access to land to the question of who is actually able to access land, who is able to consume what, because yeah, also I can only speak for Germany, but we do have a problem of nutrition becoming a question of class, where you can buy and what you can consume. While also, as like my perspective as a small-scale female farmer who's not going to inherit any land from my family, because I don't have family that's in agriculture, it's very, very, very difficult to have any access to land. So we have a problem, many young people being very trained and very having a lot of good ideas and also very innovative ideas. So kind of moving away from old traditional models of agriculture, but there's not really places where they can practice and where they can cultivate. So that's also something that we are trying to address and trying to reclaim certain parts of the city to have more as like spaces of commons where people can use the land but don't have to own it, which is also one of the perspectives that urban agriculture can and hopefully will open up, is to question the ideas of property that we have right now, where land is owned and used in a way, but maybe to move away to have more of a idea of a common land use. Yes, so I think one more thing that I would like to mention is that we also are trying to integrate the idea of the city of Cologne and many cities in Germany being a center of where people migrate to. So we also want to always link the question of nutrition and agricultural production to also have it seen as a representation of multicultural societies. So always, when we are talking about the variety of vegetables, for example, me as a vegetable farmer, when we're talking about what we are actually planting, to always keep in mind, who are we planting this for? What are people eating? Because it may differ from like traditional things that we learn in an agricultural school in Germany when we are planting food. So this is just kind of the basis of like the intersectional perspective that we're trying to add, and try to work with people on the local level to find answers on how we can change the way we're consuming here, because as we have seen, cities like Bonn and countries like Germany are a major problem. So we're trying our part. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to mention it's rather difficult to answer such a topic. To be honest, I have some doubts about if those questions are really whether local or global in a way. If you think in the moment we are talking very much about stability of food supply in a way. This is one main topic. If you are talking about food security, stability of supply gets very much important. And now we have seen such cries as a war, as other issues. And in this respect, I think we have to think how to make food systems more resilient. And I've seen there's a very good website. It's about table debate.org, where they've also discussed this topic in a way. And the issue is always if we find the right balance between regional, maybe global supply of food on the one hand, and on the other hand, we need these local capacities in the way. What I have in mind and the experience in Kenya was when we discussed with people that for a long time, for instance, agricultural research were neglected. There was this comparative advantage and people focused very much on other things than agriculture. Now we are in a situation where self-sufficiency of those countries gets very much important, and then it's rather hard to build up these capacities which are necessary to produce in their own country in a very short time. Therefore, my feeling is that we have to look for the right balance, which is a little bit easy said, between these local solutions we talked about on the one hand, and also other ways of supply, also global supplies, in order to have a food system which is quite resilient.
Yes, the role of education is a key issues, because for indigenous people, education is about how to manage the knowledge, or how to give this knowledge to the new generation. And when this process is not done, we lost many things that we have information that we accumulate for a long period. It's massive information about how to produce the plants, how to cook them, how the people react with because for instance, there is some plants that show us events that are coming from the nature, since inside that is necessary for the local culture to be aware about exchange phenomenon that we in our cosmovision we know. Education is very important for children, children is separate more or less for the original place, and that is difficult when it's necessary to connect with the land and the old generation, because in other ways some massive information that we don't keep on is directly related to our sustainability and in our land, in our community. And therefore, our effort in this project that we perform in Chile is target the children for that reason. And from education, we touch new renewable energy, touch the agriculture to create a space for interaction. That's we need. The education is fundamental.
Yeah, I can add something to what Pedro had mentioned. Yeah, I already mentioned in my presentation that Indigenous women are also the ones transferring knowledge to the next generation, and this is very important for food production systems, health practices, as well as on nutrition. These are very localized, really, because it depends on the culture. At the same time, it depends on the ecosystems wherein each community is existing. So most of the time, it's a local process in how to transfer this knowledge, which goes hand in hand with the culture, as well as the perspectives of people on how to value their forest, because some are still hunting and gathering all these resources from the forest for medicine, food, or whatever uses they need it, as well as even in the rivers, they are the ones who can identify which are the edible ones, at the same time the poisonous ones, if there are ever like that. So it's really a transfer of knowledge to the next generation. And even in the local areas, some of the younger generation are no longer interested in food production because of this commercialization, and you can easily buy in the town centers or the provincial centers. Sometimes they just buy all these very commercial and processed foods, which are not really healthy. But of course, the older generation, the women specifically, are really putting efforts on how to really educate the younger generation on how to produce, how to process, as well as in times of some surplus, they also learn how to do the marketing of other products to share to everyone. And it's very important. We have an education process or capacity building process wherein we really target the next generation for all of these capacity building programs, and we invite the older generation knowledge holders to be the lecturers and to share whatever knowledge systems and practices that they had been practicing over the years. And of course, with the exchange of the younger generation also bring up some of the innovations or whatever knowledge they have to improve the systems, as well as in helping them make the processing of food more easier with some machines or from some equipments that they need, which had never been used before, but these were now being introduced by the younger generation. So it's a two-way exchange, both from the knowledge holders, from the communities, at the same time from the young people who go to school outside of the village, then encourage them to come back for this exchange of knowledge. And I think that's what I can say.
Yes, maybe you can.
Yeah, I can just maybe answer right away. So yes, while the school, not the school action plan, but the Edible City Action Plan was written, it started in 2018. One of the demands was that each school, no matter what school, if it's elementary school or if it's like a higher education school, would have a school garden. to implement, because we also heavily emphasize the importance of education. So, and also the question asks, because every person, well, almost every child goes to school. So if you start there, then a lot of people run through that system, and a lot of people can actually get in touch with this knowledge, and it's not so selective. So that was one of the demands, and it was approved by the City Council of Cologne, and to kind of outsource, because this is like a huge project. If there's like, I think about 400 schools in Cologne in total, so how are they going to actually do the logistics of building these kinds of school gardens? So it was kind of outsourced into a joint venture between the Food Policy Council of Cologne and the Umweltamt, like the administrative bureau for environmental questions, I guess. That's how I would translate it. And yeah, so there have been more of like different participatory processes of how developing ideas how these school gardens can be realized. So I think that this is kind of we wrote about that. How Miss cut my acting, and yeah, so I think that's kind of the status quo. But that part of the it's part of this whole edible city action plan that was approved by the city. Yes. And
there's one thing we should a little bit be aware. I think this topic of urbanization and supermarkets is one in Kenya, and up to my opinion, sometimes the issue of supermarkets is overestimated, and it seems to be that that is a very interesting topic in research, and a lot of people are working with it. If you are looking to the situation on the ground, supply of supermarkets in Kenya, especially with those products, is about 20% or something like that. It has to do with the situation that in Kenya, urbanization is not so much progressed as in some Asian countries. And one of the topics which, in my opinion, is underestimated are street markets, local markets, buying from the farmer, and all these different things. So we had in mind, and also this is one of the topics I've learned also in our project, that it makes sense much more to look to this local supply systems in a way, in order if you are thinking about food security, and if you are thinking about inclusive value chains, those value chains which are focusing really on disadvantaged groups in the country. So yes, there is an issue. It's a very attractive product also in the supermarkets, but still, and I think for the next years, the local supply systems, street markets, and those things play a much more important role. And therefore, I think we should focus a little bit more on this. And I said, this is one of the issues. For instance, you have to look to the hygienic situations. We have also seen that even on the local markets, often farmers didn't have any access because middlemen and other wholesalers took over this business in a way. Therefore, it was quite difficult for the farmers to get some more access to these points. And that is still a topic which is worth to look for, maybe also from the political side. For instance, local policy could mean that they safeguard that farmers have some access to those markets without any hindrances. We have to look so that they maybe have some simple technologies in order to store those products, because when I talked about indigenous vegetables, I normally had to say indigenous leafy vegetables. And one of the problems a lot of farmers and were faced with was the post-harvest losses, which are maybe up to 50%. I think we would estimate 50% food losses before those products reach the consumers. Therefore, I think there would be a need also on a local level to look for some solutions for this problem. I'm partly right with Pareto Tyrannic Grenna. I think if you're looking for the history, often in those farms, it started with substance production for the whole family, and then the excess of products was sold on the market, which is quite okay, but it leads to the problem that if you are doing this, you have the problem that at times of overproduction, the prices are very low, and if you don't have to sell it to other times, then it's quite difficult. So production is very much dependent on rainfall patterns in these countries. Therefore, we said mostly the farmers were more successful if they focus a little bit on a continuous supply to the market. But still, one problem I can't solve, that is the situation if it comes to market productions, and often the men take over these opportunities. And therefore, I think one has to think very much about empowerment of women, that they have the chance really to take their decisions in the family about marketing of those products. I think that would be very much necessary.
I actually just wanted to, I'm not no expert on this specific topic, but I do want to add that it's something that we are also dealing with when we are talking about urban agriculture, and it does touch the subject of gentrification. So either, you know, foods are gentrified and are all of a sudden turned into like a high commodity food, but also in the way that we are working in cities and the way we want to, have agriculture there. This is also becoming a lifestyle, and this is also making certain parts of the city more attractive. While the aim was to be there because people want food that are living there. So this is not just, I feel like it's like while you're aiming for something going forward and having like a positive transformation, a lot of unexpected side results can also come in, and we are trying to be very conscious of that and handle it with care and think about it before we just start all these gardens everywhere, because it is a gentrification motor also. So I just wanted to add that from our perspective, because it kind of reminded me of the same thing.
Yeah. From Professor Bokelmann, who's really very open to all these critical questions. So he was really very creative in bringing all these different dimensions together. And I liked also that Katrin is pretty aware about the effects. And I think I want to point to the question of education. One of the problems is that we have, for a long period of time, not built on local knowledge. And normally we just took over a very general Eurocentric way of teaching and learning. And so I think a lot of knowledge was lost on the way, and especially in the field of agriculture, where we depend on the environmental conditions. And of course, meanwhile, we know that local knowledge is important. And I think even during the last decade, there were a lot of work done, because ecological farming is very much based on the local conditions and local knowledge. But up till now, still, I think the whole system of education is not oriented towards building on the local knowledge and improving local knowledge, but it has been transferred from very different countries, like irrigation. And so a lot of negative effects on our environmental conditions have happened, especially in the global south, because It was a knowledge brought to that part of the world without reflecting the situation on the ground. So that was what I wanted to add. And I think the Philippines know about it very much, like the Chile people who come from these regions, that for a long period of time, we didn't build agriculture on the local knowledge system, especially, and it is sensitive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. I have just rejoined, and I think I found comments taking place on the role of women and in the indigenous food production system. From the point of view of Etamam, the practice that I have shared with you a bit about today. Pastoralist systems in general, have considerations for the participation of women, whether it is in food production or whether it is in the preservation of knowledge. And in the case of Etamam, even supporting migration and supporting or taking part in negotiation for access to critical pastoralist resources. In our culture, in general, what happens is, when the males are herding livestock, the women are preparing watering points, so that at the time, say at noon, when livestock is being taken to water, the women are now, taking water out of wells and making sure that the animals, are watered. And the roles of women in the pastoral, value chain do not end there. In the village or in the kraal in the evening, they are the ones to sort of draw milk from the animals, as the men take care of other tasks such as mending fences or assuring security, because sometimes this is a commodity, that thieves or others in pastoralist communities try and steal, because it's a store of wealth. Yeah, and the roles of women overall, go to food preparation or even sale of milk or livestock products and things like that. Just furthermore on their role in negotiation for access, they also form negotiation parties. Women engage women from different communities, and during negotiations for access to pastures, women as well, are considered. So basically, things like, how do we ensure respect for, say, young girls or women in the crowds, to cover things such as possibilities or potentials of gender-based violence or sexual harassment and things like this. Because in one, settlement of crowds, you can have different personalities, and ensuring their safety or security is part of negotiations. Usually, a lot of reflections, a number of reflections are contained in our magazine, which focused, I think it was KDF's, that the pastoralist magazine, which dealt in detail with the practice of Etamam. We have a lot of pastoralist women talking about their role in that magazine. I think Sabine can share with you that file. But the overarching thing in pastoralist communities, as opposed to what is understood out there, is that, the system takes care of young and old women or men. Obviously, sometimes it's not to the sort of levels that dominant societies perceive of these roles. But if looked in detail, you can glean and see that, through this sophistication, that pastoral societies did take care of both males and females. Thank you. Yeah, so the primary custodians, the person who is overall responsible for livestock care is the males. Usually it is an elder, a male elder is the one who, makes the overall decisions, including, especially to assure, to make sure that this livestock has access to pastures. This is usually the decision of men, and they're the ones who send negotiation parties. Now, the communication is such that because the woman is the one who milks the cows in the evenings, she realizes that the milk is no longer yielding. The cows are no longer giving enough milk. This is a pointer to the possibility that there is not enough water in the grazing areas. Or during the watering, because they are watering at daytime, they realize that it's harder to draw water from the wells. And this is again reflected in the yield of milk. So this sort of conversations take place within, families and the overall kraal. And then a decision is made. But theoretically, it is the male elder who decides to send negotiation parties, who are usually young men, to the other community to sort of request for a negotiation process to start over what may be abundant pastoral resources in those communities. Yeah, but when you look at the broad range of, in terms of the alignment of institutions, while of course it is likely that you might see in pastoralist communities that men are sat alone, and you might think that, oh, this is the only decision-making institution. It's usually not the case, because women also have their own sort of council in which they talk about these issues and then relay to the higher institution. One of those important ones before the highest, it's like the council of the community. It's called the Coña. I think I put it somewhere on the third slide. This one, this is the platform in which both women and men, deliberate and make decisions over the running of affairs in society, including the governance of natural resources. So on this particular platform, everyone is invited. Every issue is deliberated in the open, even as individual male and female councils, or we call them trees actually, because it's under a tree, the tree of women and the tree of men. These ones, converge at a Coña, which then takes issues to a male-dominated sort of sacred function or parliament. It's not deliberative. It doesn't have deliberative functions, but it has mostly spiritual and pronunciation power. So there is a good level of participation, and yeah. So as I've described. Okay.
Yeah, of course, as I again mentioned a while ago, we are now more open, or the indigenous knowledge holders are now more open to innovations and other changes just to cope up with the climate change impacts. But this has to go into information sharing, disclosure of all the information that the innovations will go into, and then wherein the community will be basing their decisions if whether they like these innovations or not. Of course, in terms of technologies like on the processing of food, the drying or storage, all of these are open innovations for them. As we know, it is really very intensive labor to process foods like pounding the rice or drying the legumes, the beans, coffee beans, etc. And there are already introduced solar multi dryer technologies wherein they can already put their products under the solar facility and can dry their products, especially during the rainy season. And this has helped more in the processing and storage of excess food. While we say that it is self-sufficient production for the family's needs or for the community's consumption needs, because of this processing technologies, some of it are now being sold into the town or provincial centers as another source of income for the farming families. And yeah, this was brought about because of these introduced technologies. But really, it takes time to let them understand on the changes and let them see on hand, and then also to have an training on how to use all of this, so that it can not be in conflict with whatever traditional values and perspectives that they have, and it show how this will be improving their production systems, processing systems until harvesting. And of course, for health, yes, we had the faraway communities had always depended on medicines from the forests. But due to this COVID situation, they even do not, some communities do not even like a vaccine. But later, when this was fully explained to them as an additional protection, as well as the no major side effects, and then they were also open to all those introduction of these medicines from the Department of Health in relation to more protection of the villages or the communities and the people within. So yeah, there's conflict, but as long as you provide the information, necessary information, come into an educational process on how to understand all of this, the people are interested. But of course, there are also communities wherein they have community protocols, for example, on the introduction of high-yielding varieties and this GMO seeds or seedlings. They really have community protocols not to bring inside these. Either they say yes or no, depending on what kind of innovations or introduction that is being made, especially with our Ministry of Agriculture. Sometimes they are more into this commercial production system, so they introduce these high-yielding varieties and also these GMO seeds, and in some communities they reject this, but there are some communities who had tried and tested, but again went back to their own traditional systems because they saw the impacts or the effects, or it's not as good as the food that they traditionally raised, and that's why they wanted to go back to the more traditional foods. That's what I can contribute.
Then,
Yeah, so I think when it comes to conflict, this system is obviously one to access natural resources and to make sure that pastoralists can access food. But negotiation, as I mentioned a bit earlier, ensures that you can access this food on a more sustainable basis and in a conflict-free manner. Because what happens during the negotiations is, you discuss who should, for example, what are their animals in which place, how conflict management in the event of incidents, can be handled, how decisions in the rangeland can be made, and the end result is that in quite a lot of seasons, pastoralists go without, a lot of problems. Of course, again, it doesn't mean zero conflict, but it means that there is a harmonious, a clear, protocol for managing conflicts. There are a bit of changes in the current system because, of course, of interaction between government and pastoralists. Government institutions have also, come to play. I would say they have adapted to the strength and the viability of ETAMAM, and have sort of introduced official sort of structures to either make it easy for pastoralists to work with, or at least to be able to know, because at certain times, because of the weaknesses in judicial systems and the dual nature of these systems, the government or government or formal actors are also sometimes roped in. So what happens is that there is a bit of change in ETAMAM, but it still remains to a good extent quite intact. These changes, in addition to changes in technology, are being well received by pastoralists, and sometimes it has made it easier, for pastoralists to access these resources. But overall, the number one output is that conflict is really, managed. The potential that they have flare-ups because another party has come to access resources in another's. This is anticipated, and this is well managed through this particular system. Back to you, Gertrude.
I just wanted to, I wanted to add something, because maybe it's, I feel like the words innovative and traditional, we're using them or the way I would use them is counterintuitive. So when I was talking about the way, we are trying to have urban spaces, to have innovative agriculture, we're trying to get away from highly industrialized agriculture and using tractors, using pesticides, all these things, using GMO, and kind of unlearn what is the idea of modernized agriculture that is being applied in Europe on a large scale, and go kind of back to more traditional knowledge, back to traditional ways of working with the earth, actually knowing the earth, touching the earth, because agriculture and the earth, there's a disconnect right now happening here. So when I say innovative, I mean traditional more in the sense that maybe other communities are using it right now, and actually they are an example to us that we can learn from. So I just wanted to clarify that in our case.
So I like to talk about the international policy, because all this problem or conflict that we face all over the world is just the policies that is reflected for local policies. For instance, for indigenous people, is our point of view is not there. We push in different way to get to modify policies that is stayed in our regions, but that nothing happened. When we claim that the international policies and also at national level incorporate our holistic view that we here try to explain. Is not just we need this point of view in the policies. In other ways, we still waiting in conflicts spread in different way that we don't like state as our culture and decide to continue in such place that we receive this world. We need to we like to stay there and continue. Therefore, we claim again, said again that the policy needs to incorporate or to finish somehow the conflicts also will be less and less and not more and more as we see until now.
Yes. Anything you'd like to share with us?
Thank you. For me, it was really interesting and important to see the local solutions we have, and I also, because I'm working long time now or last years on agroecology, and I see that this can be a concept that works out. And I also heard from the discussion also on the indigenous vegetables that it's so important to get also this on the local markets. And for me, it's more and more important to see that we have to connect the things like the food with education, bring it to the schools, to the local markets, and also the empowerment of the woman. And I really see it in this agroecology concept. And so it was again very interesting to hear all these local solutions. Thank you.
Yes, I also say thank you. The panelists organized this, also the that permit this place to discuss important issues. All this space for talk about our life that. Today is we recognize we are not in a good way or developing was arrived in conflicts all over the world. I have many examples. I have an enormous list, but I have no time to talk. And I'd like to say, we need to put in action our thought. We all have enough information, and also we have the information enough to set or see the way how to make a solution. The solution is local, of course, but also personal. For us, it's very important to be clear in this. All need to be part of the solution.
I hand over to Ms. Balawag.
Yeah, just to emphasize maybe, because we had been saying this from day one of the climate change negotiations, it's really very necessary and crucial to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples as well as their traditional knowledge systems. This was already agreed in the Paris Agreement of the UNFCCC, and to respect human rights as well as to recognize the contributions of traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local knowledge that contribute to any climate actions of the government. So there should be a synergy on how to bring together science at the same time the indigenous people's knowledge systems and practices and all of the solutions that we are developing. Of course, it's very necessary to have a collaborative effort on this from both sides, because sometimes the governments really do not reach out to the indigenous peoples. So for all the reports that we had received, the indigenous people should also be more empowered and reach out to their governments at the local level, maybe to start with, and also to their national climate change bodies or the relevant bodies who they should be working with, like the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and all of these bodies, relevant bodies that would help in supporting and building up community resilience, especially on food production systems, health, nutrition, as well as in solutions to climate change impacts. So that's my.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just a short anecdote I have in mind when we talked here about, I was member of the scientific advisory board in the ministry when we wrote something about what should we do for a more healthy diet. And what was more interesting was a reaction after this publication, because we were criticized very much also by one person of the federal court, that we are trying to restrict the freedom and decision making of consumers in a way by suggesting some of these things. And that was quite interesting, because some days later the federal court had one decision saying we have also to have in mind the freedom and decision-making possibilities of future generations, and therefore we have to think about how much it would be necessary to restrict our way of consumption in a way. And I think therefore it needs such discussion, because it's not issue just of policy or of the legislation. I think it's an issue of our mindset, that we have to change something in order to change the food system, and therefore such a discussion as today is very important, but it needs to spread it to the society in a way in order to get some more success with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, very important point. And
yeah, I think my takeaway is just that I really like discussions to emphasize the interconnectedness between the different struggles, even if they may be very local. They always have such a global global meaning behind them eventually. And then also kind of as like the homework that we need to do here, or something that I think we should keep in mind, is the question like, how can we going forward, yes, be in solidarity with these demands of institutionalizing Indigenous rights, and how can these small organizations that are working on a local level, as we are trying to realize food sovereignty, but how can we also always stay connected to this very global perspective of struggle for human and Indigenous rights, and then also in the long run climate protection. So I think that's like something that I'm going to take away from this, and thank you to everyone.